Hello everyone, welcome back to another Java tutorial. In today's video, we are going to be going over multi-dimensional arrays. For this video, you will need to know what arrays and for loops are. If you don't know what they are, I did cover that in a few previous videos, so you can check them out. But we can get started very quickly. What are multi-dimensional arrays? Before we only covered 1D arrays. So what are 1D arrays? Let's say we have an int array, and let's do r, and then we equal that to some values here. Let's do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So this is 1D array, or one-dimensional array. Now let's say we want to have a second dimensional array or a 2D array. The way we'll do this is, instead of having one here for a 1D array, we'll have two of these for a 2D array. Now you can see that we are having an error here because we declared it as a 2D array. The values in here represent the 1D array. So we need to change this up. So a 2D array is basically an array inside of an array. It's an array of arrays. So here we have our main array. Now inside of this array, we're going to have smaller arrays. So this is the main big one, but now we want to have a couple of small ones. So literally all we have to do is we have to create an array inside of this array here, like that. So we have one big array, which is it starts here and it ends here, and then inside of this array we have two smaller arrays, and then we can just populate these with values. So I'll do 1, 2, 3, and then in this we'll do 4, 5, and 6. So once again, we have one large array, and now inside of that array we have smaller arrays. So as I said, it's basically a list of lists, or an array of arrays. Now let's say we want to print out these values. We can't just do a simple sysout r0, for example. We can, but if we do print this out, you can see we get absolute nonsense. Because what this means is we're trying to print this value here. The reason for that is the way that we print out values is like this. Because we have a 2D array here, we need to print it out as a 2D array. Now, how does that work? I'm going to do a little trick to simplify this very easily, and it's just this. Imagine the first array inside of the big array is the first row. The second array is the second row. And now inside of each array we have columns. So this is column 0, 1, and 2. This is row 0, and this is row 1. So let's say we want to print out this value here. Firstly, we need to target what row it's on. Is it on row 0 or is it on row 1? So this is the first value. This value here represents the row. So let's change up. Let's say we want to target this value here, number 5. So what row is it on? Is it on row 0 or 1? Okay, well, it's on row 1, so let's target row 1. By doing this, by doing the 1 means we are looking inside of this array here. If we done 0, for example, that means we are looking inside of this row here. Let's do 1 for now. Let's target this number 5. Once we targeted the specific row that we need to target the element inside of that row. So now these are columns or elements. So, this is column 0, 1, and 2. So if we want to target column 5, which is index 1, right? So this is index 0, this is index 1. We need to just print out 1. Now if we print this out, you can see we get 5 because we are trying to get this number here 5. So we target this row, which is row 1. This is row 0, so this is row 1. We put on 1, and then this is column 1 because this is column 0. This is 1. This is 2. So then we target that column here, which is 5. So that's why we can target each row and then each column inside of that row. But now let's say we want to use a for loop with this array. We can't really do what we did before. So what we did before is we had a for loop, let's say for loop x, we'll do I is equal to 0, x is less than r dot length, and then we do I plus plus. I'll mess that up. This is supposed to be an I, and then let's open and close it. And then once again, we can't really do so r I and I, because it will print out, for example, see, it prints out 1 of 5. It doesn't really print out everything that we need in here. So how do we print out everything in this array? We'll need to do something that's called a nested loop. A nested loop is basically just a for loop inside of another for loop. So it's we're gonna have, it's like we did with the arrays. We have an array inside of a bigger array. Here we're gonna have a for loop inside of this big for loop. So one thing before we get onto that is, if you want to have so if you want to have two for loops, for example, if this for loop here is not inside of this big for loop, we can have these are the same values. The counters can have the same variable name. But now, if we have this array inside of the bigger array, you can see we have an error, because this value here needs to be different. It can't be the same as the one in the bigger for loop. So what we'll do with this, we'll just change it to j. We'll change all these to j. Alright, that's the first thing. Second thing is, we need to see what row we're on, basically. So this represents the rows. Okay, this for loop will represents each row here. But now this for loop is going to represent each column inside of that row that we're in. So for example, during the first iteration, this for loop is going to target this row. And now we're going to go into this for loop. We already have what row we're in from this array. So from this for loop. So let's say it's the first iteration. This for loop gets row 0. Now in this for loop, we know that it's row 0, and then we can target j to be each column inside of that for loop. But we need to tell this for loop what row we're on. So the way we'll do this is, in the j is less than array.length, we'll change the array.length and we'll add in the value I in here. What this does is, it tells the for loop, while j is less than the whatever row of this array, the length of that. So for example, we have the array here, then I will be, let's say I0, so we're targeting the very first one. So this will get the length of only this here. And then if we print this out, then we can print it out the way we did before. So we'll do R, and then we do I, and then in here we do J. And if we print this out, you see we get every single value. I will go over this again now. This for loop here targets each row. Okay? So I is equal to 0. So this here will be 0, and this here will be 0. So now we know that we are on the very first row, because we have row 0. So now we get the length of that row, which is 3, and we run this for loop 3 times. This here, during the first iteration, stays at 0. And this j gets incremented 3 times. So the very first iteration, it'd be 0, then it'd be 1, then it'd be 2, and then this will be false, so this will not get run again. And then in the second iteration, this for loop, instead of it being 0, it'll be 1, which means it's this row. So this for loop will be passed in as 1, which is this second row, okay? And then this will get changed to 1 and 0. So now we are targeting this row, and we are printing out every element. So it'll be 0 for the 4, then we'll print out 1 for 5, and then we'll print out 2 for 6. And that's the way we can print out everything inside of the 2-dimensional array. Let's say we have a 3D array, which is a bit different. It might be a bit hard to understand, but we'll get through it. So this is a 2D array because we have a big list inside, we have 2 small lists inside of 1 big list. Let's say we have a 3D array. A 3D array, once again, acts a bit different. The way it represents now, it's going to be a smaller array inside of a bigger array inside of an even bigger array. So let's print this out. So let's say we have our main array, and let's say we have a smaller array in here, okay? Then let's say we have another smaller array in here. Okay, so we have, just like we did with the 2D arrays, we have 1 big array and we have 2 smaller arrays. But let's add another one. Okay. Now we have 3 smaller arrays inside of the big one. But now in here, let's add another array. In here, we're going to add in the value, let's say 1 and 2. Same thing in here, where we're going to add in the values, let's see, 3 and 4. In here, we're going to add in the values, not in here, because we need to put all of this inside of the array. Do 3 and 4. And here we can do something like, we can do 5 and 6. But the only difference is now, because this is like 3 arrays inside of 1 array, we can have more values in here. So we can have another array in here. We can represent this as, let's do 7 and 8. So we have 1 big array. Inside of that big array, we have 3 arrays. This is the first one. This is the second one. This is the third one. And inside each one of them, we have more arrays. So inside of this array, we have 2 arrays. Inside of this array, we only have 1 array. And inside of this array, we only have 1 array. Now let's say we want to print them out. We'll do it the exact same way as we did this. So we will have another for loop in here. I'm going to get rid of this. So we're going to have another for loop in here. And we're going to kind of copy what we did here before. So I'm going to print out this. Again, a couple of things will need to be changed though. So for example, this J, let's change this to a K. And then this I will change to a, we'll change this to a J. Change this to a J. But then we'll also need to add in the I as well now, like this. Because what we're doing here is we're targeting the row. So this will target what row we're on. So for example, if we are on this row, or if we're on this row, this one will target what row, what row we're inside of the bigger row, and this one will target each element inside of here. And then we can just print it out. We can print out that array, do R, then we'll have the very first value, which is I, we'll have the other one, which is J, and then we'll have the third one, which is K. And if we print this out, you can see we get every single value inside of that array. We get 1, 2, 7, and 8, because we have 1, 2, 7, and 8 inside of this array here. Then we have 3 and 4, because that's what's inside of this array. Then we have 5 and 6, which is what is inside of this array here. We can't continue to do this more and more, but it just gets a bit more complicated. There's most of the time you don't need to do that. But this is the way that multi-dimensional arrays work. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.